So moving on to today's program, our speaker got her history degree from Oakland University and her preservation certificate from Eastern. She's been the curator over at the Clawson Historical Museum for 7 years. And for those of you who don't know, the Clawson Historical Museum is a home built in 1919 and it's furnished to reflect the 1920s. She's been researching kit homes, which we're talking about today, for several years now. Please help me welcome Melody Nichols.
Very much, and thank you for having me come today. I got interested, someone asked me, how did I get interested in kit homes? And it's one of those things where it's sort of hard to remember what the beginnings really were, the trigger that got me interested, but the whole idea of kit homes, how many people are familiar with what a kit home is? So quite a lot of you. The whole idea of opening a box in the mail, I mail order everything. Everything, from my shoes to my makeup. I love getting things in the mail. And the whole idea that you could get a house with every piece of it, and it's all numbered like kind of like Lincoln Logs, and you could put this together and you could pick anything you want. To me, that was fascinating. And then I started learning about the companies. A lot of people are familiar with Sears and Roebuck, Honor Built, and Sears Modern Homes. But then I started looking at some of the little companies and the Michigan companies. We had 3 here in Michigan, Aladdin being one of the largest ones that shipped things all over the country, and I always root for the underdog. So I became really fascinated with Aladdin Homes. So we're going to look at, well, once I figure out how to, there we go. Quick introduction for those of you who don't know what a kit home is. It's completely pre-cut. That means all of your timbers, your siding, the interior and exterior walls, they may be plasterboard or lath, your shingles, everything but your foundation, your flooring, interior walls, electric, everything included in this house. It's completely pre-cut. It is not a prefab home. It doesn't come in panels or any kind of, walls or anything like that. It's all just numbered timbers. And sometimes you could get your light fixtures, your doorknobs, all of that good stuff. You could get a kitchen cabinet. This was, they started really in the era before pre-fitted kitchens. So you may have one cabinet in your kitchen, but it was likely to be a really beautiful cabinet if those survived. Those were usually optional. And these kit homes are what I consider them to be the grandchildren of plan book houses. Plan book houses came about in about the mid-19th century, and they offered people building homes opportunities to see styles of houses that their local builder may never have seen or know how to build. Andrew Jackson Downing was the famous person who really got this going in the United States. And he loved these Gothic houses, which now we look at and go, oh my goodness, they're so ornately gaudy. Sorry if you like them, but they're a bit gaudy for me. But they were the first thing that made people start to think that you could maybe build a house that was different than your neighbor's house, not just have your builder build it. The first company that actually offered this was the North American Construction Company. They started in 1906 offering what they called a knockdown garage and a boathouse. And the way it came about, I find this fascinating company because they had no building experience, no architectural drafting experience, they didn't own any lumber or saws, and they didn't know the first thing about building a house. And we know this because Otto Sovereign, who started the company with his brother William, actually wrote a book in the 1950s talking about how he came to do this, $50 million on a shoestring. By 1950s, this company was worth $50 million. They started with an investment of $200, and what they knew how to do, what Otto knew how to do was market. He was a marketing genius. He took out this little ad, and I'll give you a little copy of it here at the bottom. It cost them $2,000, money they had to borrow, to put this ad in the Saturday Evening Post. The $200 they started with, the $2,000 they borrowed and they paid back, but the $200 they put in was the only capital they ever put into that company because this idea caught on. And they said, well, we don't know how to build houses, but we know people who do know how to build houses. I'm sorry?
I just read that send stamps for catalog.
Yeah, you send stamps for the catalog. And for, what was it, $1? Oh, it probably wasn't even that. No, just the stamps, you got the catalog free.
Yeah.
For $126, you got a house. So am I blocking it? Let's see. $126. It's a small house. But as they got better at this, they started hiring architects and draftsmen, and they bought a lumber company to to cut all of their lumber and do this for them and ship it out. And it caught on and they started making more and more money. Well, then the lumber company said, this is a really good deal, we're gonna start our own company. So they started Sterling Homes, and Aladdin eventually ended up having to get their own lumber yards. A lot of companies really got on the bandwagon with this kit home idea. By 1908, Sears and Roebuck, who became the most popular, once again, really good marketing, and the fact their catalogs were in every home. They started about 1908. Montgomery Ward's had Wardway Homes. They were really great. Montgomery Ward, our oldest mail order catalog company, actually didn't design their own homes in the beginning. They used all of Gordon Van Tyne's homes, and they just changed the name. So Gordon Van Tyne got on the bandwagon, and there were Sears, or Sterling, Lewis Liberty, Pacific, Bennett, Harris, numerous homes that did it. I keep finding more every day. I don't even know all of them. Sears sold over 42,700 homes by 1921.
Oh my gosh.
That's a copy from their 1921. I guess I do have a pointer, if that helps. They love testimonials of, we built a house and we saved $300, or whatever they saved, and it's the best house ever. They sold 75,000 homes at least. Aladdin must have sold a similar number. There were at least 7 companies that I'm aware of. And it's interesting that there's so much interest in these homes because they make up only between 2 and 3% of the stock of existing homes in our country right now. So you'd think it'd be like finding a needle in a haystack. Why were they so popular? For one thing, they took all the guesswork out of building a home. If you could swing a hammer, you could build this house. You could hire somebody to do your foundation. But otherwise, you're trying to figure out, if you look here, how many shingles do I need? How much lath to do a room? How do I figure my plastering? How long is it going to take me to do my bricks? How many do I need? This took all the guesswork out. You got the whole house. You got the blueprints. All you needed was somebody basically competent to build it. The other thing that made them really popular was you got all the popular styles of the day. No more Victorian rambling houses. Everybody wanted modern. That was the word, especially in the 20s. Everything needed to be modern, clean, lots of windows, lots of light, air in the rooms. And Aladdin really played up on that. Light and air in your rooms. And they had to do something because their houses started out really small. So the best thing you could say was it had 2 windows. The one on the upper, this one here, this is a home in Clawson. Most of my research my examples will focus on Clawson because that's where I've done most of my research. I've had to limit myself in area. I'll get into more about that why later. This one is a house on Hendrickson. I'll show you some pictures of that house actually later to see what has happened to that house. This one is still on Renshaw, I believe, in Clawson. That's an Aladdin Edison. And then this one down here is an Aladdin Venus, which is on Fisher Court, kitty corner from the museum, which is one of the first houses where I started to realize there were all these kit homes right around us. Popular styles of homes. It saved them time, money, material. I love a little diagram down here about how you can cut your sheathing for your gable out of one board, and you're supposedly going to be able to get 20 feet out of lumber from a 16-foot board. It was magic, right? But that's Aladdin. Built in a day, one of their catalogs says. And I didn't mention why. The reason they called themselves Aladdin was the palace in, I think it was 1001 Arabian Nights, that was built overnight. And they said these homes will spring up overnight all across the country because they'll be so easy to build. You won't have any waste lumber because there's nothing to cut. It's going to save you time. Your carpenter's not going to have to figure out what to put where. And a lot of the companies even offered financing, which was very different than it is now. Up until the early 1920s, if you wanted a mortgage on a house, you needed to pretty much have 80% of the cash down. You could mortgage 20%. That changed, which is why a lot of people got into trouble in the Depression. But in the beginning, it was really hard to get a mortgage. If you didn't have cash, you were not going to own a home. It was simple as that. You were not going to be part of that American dream. As I mentioned, hardware, plumbing, lighting, your built-in kitchen cabinets, built-in dining cabinets, even your furnace. You could purchase all of this from these companies. Custom made to fit your home exactly so you wouldn't have any waste and anything extra. These two on the left here are from the 1930 Sears catalog. And they were offering a lot of the revival styles, which were becoming popular. So how to identify kit houses? There are several ways you can go about it. First thing you do is the windshield survey, and this is where I say the caution comes in. If you go to do this by yourself, you will get into a car accident. Because you will be driving down the road and you will see a house and you'll get your camera out and you won't realize there's a parked car in front of you until it's too late. I did swerve in time, but it's very dangerous, so I don't recommend it. Take a friend with you who's got the camera, and also beware of traveling with someone when you yell, "Stop!" or "Oh my God." Make sure that they know you're looking for houses, because I've just about given my husband a heart attack a couple of times. And he says, "Oh my, what was it?" You know, he thought a cat ran in front of us or something. I know, you have to back up and go around the block. So now I'm learning to say, "Oh dear, would you mind going around the corner, please?" Don't shout. Because it's very addicting. And you'll start to see what you think are kit houses everywhere. You'll start to look for features. What I found with this one, and this is how I started taking my digital camera, driving around the streets that I wanted to look at and taking pictures of every single house that I thought even had the remotest chance of being a kit house. With this one I got lucky, because what it still has, you'll see it's a Sears Valonia that's on Hendrickson Avenue in Clawson, and below it is a picture from the 1926 Sears catalog. And I got lucky because these particular pillars here, and I'm sorry that you can't see it real well, this particular design was only used on Sears houses. It was their pattern. And they only used it in 6 or 7 models. So immediately I knew something was up. And if you can see, sorry, I thought this picture would look better, but you can see this porch railing. They still have the original porch railing. It has little cutouts in it. Well, that part was original. So even though the windows have changed, on the eaves, up here these eaves are plain, these eaves still have the exposed rafters, the windows have been changed. I knew that I could have something there. So that was my first clue. If you want to identify these houses, start with the big ones. Little ones are difficult because they've typically been added onto and remodeled. Whereas the larger and nicer the home, the more chances are that the subsequent owners in the last 90 years have liked it the way it is and maybe not taken these features off. Then you start to look for the easy clues. If you get lucky, you might go down in the basement or up in the attic and see a number on a rafter. It's very faint here, but it actually says 2089 in an R. 2089 happens to be the model of that house number. Everyone marked their rafters or something on them. And if you're interested, I have a few copies of this. It's some of the different markings that are on the different companies' homes. Some would use grease pencils, some would use labels, some would use stencils. It all depends on what the house was. So this isn't completely updated, but it will give you some starting points if you think, maybe I need to check out the rafters and climb up in that nice hot attic. You also might get lucky and see on a bathtub or a sink an S or an SR, Sears and Roebuck. I've never seen one of these. All 3 of these photographs actually were taken by and belong to a lady named Rosemary Thornton, who is probably the country's biggest authority on Sears homes. She writes a blog, and I've borrowed her pictures for the day because she does such wonderful work. If you really get lucky, you might hit the jackpot. This is a shipping label. And right here it says Holman Avenue, Chicago. We know that's a Sears house, because that's where they were, was Holman Avenue. So you look for the little clues like that, and these are the easy clues. You also might find something in abstracts or deeds. For the Montgomery Ward Wardway homes, if you see Larrabee Trust as a mortgage holder or a deed holder, or you see a trustee named Thomas P. Rorden, you're dealing with Montgomery Ward. If you see these other trustees, Walker Lewis, Weiland, Powell, or Parr, those are Sears trustees, which is more than likely that they had a mortgage through one of those 2 companies. And I've actually identified a couple of houses that I really wasn't sure of simply because I found these records in an abstract. And I saw that trustee's name, or I saw Davenport, Iowa, and immediately knew what direction I needed to look. Sometimes quitclaim deeds and things from the county might have this information. I personally haven't had much luck with that, but I've been told that people have really found good information there. And you might get really lucky. You might have a homeowner who has blueprints. You might have historical photographs either from a homeowner, or we have pictures at the Historical Museum. Someone, just took a picture of a street and that house happens to be on the street. Original windows can also be a good identifier. In this particular house, We found this one several different ways. We were able to cross-reference some things. We found it in a deed. We also know it's in an area that's very heavily populated with kit homes on Phillips Avenue in Clawson. But the windows are the 6/1 panes. And on the bottom, they're 9/1. That was one that Sears used. Ward's made an almost identical home, and theirs were 6/1. So if we're looking at trying to decide the two companies, sometimes it's something as little as, thank goodness they kept the old windows. And as someone who's interested in preservation, I will encourage you to always keep your old windows. And also you get owner's records or stories or families, my grandpa built this house, anecdotal evidence. Be careful, because almost everybody who has a kit house will tell you it's a Sears, whether it is or not. Grandpa built this house, it's a Sears. I know it is. Well, it's not always. Sometimes it's some other company and nobody remembered, they forgot. Also, if you're looking for Ladden homes, the Clark Historical Library in Mount Pleasant has all the records from that company. When they closed that company in the 1980s, the Sovereign, or whoever was running the Sovereign Trust, I believe, owns it now, they realized that they had something special. So unlike Sears and Ward's, who basically dumped all theirs in the trash, Ladden gave theirs to the library. So you can actually go there, you can see all the sales books, you can see the sales records, and you might get lucky, like we did. We went up there, and this is, you can't read it unfortunately, but it is actually a sales order for that house. Here's a historic photo we had at the museum. We had a picture of the house that I got from one of my first windshield surveys because it looked like a crummy little house, and I love crummy little houses. And the front porch has actually been enclosed, but you can see it wasn't originally. And then I went and found a sales record, and the only reason I found it was because I knew who used to own the land, and his name was on the record. So detective work, but it was one of our most exciting ones. And then to unearth the historic photograph was pretty cool too. Photographs can be your gold mine. Even a picture of, Easter 1942 with people standing on the front porch, you might be able to see a detail that used to be on that house that is now gone. And that might help you identify something or pique your imagination. Like I said, this is that Sears Hampton on Hendrickson Boulevard. You see how it looked here when they built it. In fact, in this photograph, when we doctor it a little, we see that the laundry tub is still sitting in the yard, so they're not even done with the house. And here it is, picture in the catalog. It's an excellent match. So we know this is what we're dealing with beyond what the family told us. And then we see the house now. Here on the left, that's a picture from a few days ago. You'd never guess it was a Sears house. It's just completely changed. Nothing left. So we don't know when that happened, but they've even bricked it. So you can never assume that what you're looking at is what was originally there, because exterior features change, and on these little houses, they change quite quickly. Here's another unfortunate house. The one on the bottom is a Sears Crescent, an almost pristine, beautiful example, other than the siding being changed. The one on the top has had some terrible things done to it. Lost most of its character. The only reason we identified this was because I happened to go by as they were tearing off all the old stuff and saw the original porch shape and recognized it as a crescent before they took out all the windows and everything. Otherwise, you wouldn't really guess. It's very generic looking now. So a little hard to identify. So as you get into looking a little deeper, you can look at interiors and floor plans. Those can be clues for some of the houses. If you think you got a match, take some measurements and you can compare those to the catalog measurements. That won't always be accurate because they tend to change their plans year to year. You may be working with maybe 3 years of catalogs, but they may have had that house for 15 years in different catalogs. So there can be some changes, but you might be able to get a pretty good idea. And that was how we identified this one as a possible Louis LaSalle. Just actually, a friend of mine owns this. It's right down the street from the museum. And we thought that's what it was. And when we went to take the measurements of the floor plans, we realized they were an exact match. So we were pretty sure we knew what we had here because the porch had been changed, the side porch was enclosed. We'd lost a lot of the exterior details, except for the configuration of the windows and that little clipped gables on that roof. That was our first clue. And we marked lumber again. This is a crate, and once again, I'm sorry, my pictures are rather dark, but this is O.M. Fisher, and it came out of a house that we suspected was an Ladden house, And when we went to the Clark Historical Library, lo and behold, we found O.M. Fisher's name on an order form for that particular model. So that was a really exciting find. And we actually had the owner of that house donate that board to us. So we have that in our exhibit now of houses. And then at the bottom there's a picture of the house as it looks today. It's been sided, but it still closely resembles how it would have looked in the catalog. So that can be very helpful. You can talk to the owner. If you're not the owner, but you think there's a neat one you want to talk to, this Sears Hathaway is a perfect match for its catalog counterpart here. It's on Phillips, and the owner knows what he has. And he says, he's told us, that he has records to prove it, but he won't share them with us yet. So share your records. And then a lot of luck and perseverance, and mostly luck. This is one I found that is probably the most interesting one. As far as we know, this is the only Chesterfield Sears ever sold. And it's on Hendrickson Avenue in Clawson. We think we may have another one on the other side of town, but even Rosemary Thornton has never seen one. And I happened to be driving by one day, and I'd driven by it a dozen times, and finally one day I stopped and I said, wait a minute, that's an awfully large house. How come I've never looked at that before? So I took that photograph on the left, went and looked at the catalog, and I thought, wow, I was even standing in the right place. And the only thing that's changed is they've added a little extra gable on the front porch here, but they even still have the open back porch. All the windows were pretty much in the right positions. Everything was right. The smaller chimney was the only thing, so maybe they put in one less fireplace. We don't know. So that one we got lucky. Sears Chesterfield was only offered in the 1926 catalog, so it's pretty rare. You're going to find more difficulties if you go out and try to identify these houses. Aladdin alone offered 450 different plans. They were in business from 1906 until 1980. And they would change things depending on what sold, what was interesting, what people didn't like, what more modern homeowners expected. If you look at the two on the bottom especially, this one on the left is a Wardway model, and the one on the right is a Sears model. And I'm hard-pressed to find very many differences. The differences that are there could have just been changes from one year to the next if I'm seeing an actual house. That was very hard to identify. And I found at least 4 other companies that offered a house almost identical to that one. The one on the top is also another one, difficult. First glance, you think it's the same house. Then you notice, well, this one on the left has an extra window in the middle and it's a larger home. Once again, though, they're similar enough that you're going to have some troubles with identifying those. Also, reversed floor plans, like this here. Same house, turned around the other way. A little tricky to look at. Custom homes were another one. We have a Sears in Clawson. Nobody could identify, but we know it's a Sears. But must have been a custom because it doesn't look like anything in the catalog. And they did do custom work. Later additions, modifications, taking off the porch, changing the windows. Also copycats will make it very difficult. There's one at the bottom. Popular house. Came in plan books, came in kit homes. That can make it difficult for you to identify that. And the worst part are little houses and 4-square houses. These little guys here, little bungalow houses, front gable, every company had them, and local builders made them. 4-square houses, they were popular for about 15 years, and they all tend to look alike. The only way you're going to identify one of these is if you find something strange about it, a strangely placed window or something really unique. Otherwise, they're going to be hard. You stick to the bigger ones. So if you live in a kit house, what do you do with it? Appreciate it. Let it be what it is. I mentioned that I like crummy little houses. To me, crummy little houses are, they're the American dream. There are so many people who could never afford a home, that were maybe renting rooms or renting an apartment, didn't have the money, especially until there was the GI Bill, was how a lot of people bought their first homes. They had no chance of owning a home. But for $150 or $200 or $400 that they maybe could save up, they could get one of these small little 3-room houses. And it was their own. So I have a real passion for those little houses. And then you find the big ones like this here, this one on the top, this is one of the few homes that Montgomery Wardway actually designed on their own. And I don't know, but I call this the Tudor Bungalonial. And that's not my term, actually another friend of mine came up with that. But you look at it, we've got a Tudor peak, we've got colonial details, a little Dutch, group there. It's everything. It's everything thrown into one poor little house. And then you get little ones down here, like this little Sears Solus was a little 4-room house. Some of them didn't even have bathrooms. And this is a Aladdin, not the Edison, Garfield, I believe it was, or Dresden, Aladdin Dresden. Just a little bungalow house. So if you got it, preserve it. If it's a little house, let it be a little house. Keep what's special about it. That includes especially your plumbing and lighting fixtures. They may look outdated, but a lot of them can be redone and preserved, and they really add character to your home, and especially the external features. We all like to have things low maintenance, especially, we get to that point where we're not climbing up on ladders anymore, but sometimes our old windows can be redone, and they give a nice character to our house that replacements are never going to do, and they're never going to be that nice old hardwood. Even in the cheaper houses, the wood is probably better than we're going to buy today. And share it. If you have information on these homes, Grandpa built one, or you know something about it, or you have a catalog, share it with your historical society or your museum. They like to get this information. And if they can't use it, they'll know someone who could probably use it. I say that, but you can always bring it to me. And enjoy it, because you live in a really special part of history. Own your own home with the small monthly payments. You see the guy here, he's throwing away his monthly rent checks. Move out to the suburbs and give the kiddies a chance. It was what they wanted, and it was a very special part of our history. There are actually some companies that are still doing something similar to this. Some of the lumber yards will actually sell you all the materials to build a home. However, they're typically not pre-cut. And I actually have recently heard of a company, a man named Charles Monroe, who I believe is actually around here in Detroit somewhere, has rebooted the Aladdin Company. And they've so far created plans for 2 Aladdin homes. Now, I'm not sure if they're just selling blueprints or if they're actually going to try to do the kit homes themselves, but they're offering these designs again. So here we are 100 years later, and there's still some interest in these styles of homes. And then I want to share with you, too, one of the things that I found when I talked about saving hardware. I've looked for this for 7 years. This is a doorknob for the Aladdin Company. And it actually has a little diamond on the front and it says Aladdin Houses. And I can't tell you how many bins of rusty hardware my husband has dug through at antique shop and junk stores looking for an Aladdin doorknob. And I finally actually did find one on eBay about 2 months ago. So I was thrilled. So we have 2 Aladdin doorknobs now. So I brought it so you can take a look at it. Just kind of a neat little piece of a little relic of history. And I do have some handouts on those markings. I have a little book I put together. It does deal only with Clausen, but it does give you some ideas of some of the kit homes. And the pictures in the book are all the pictures from the catalogs. And the idea being there's a map in the back. You can drive by the existing house in Clausen and you can see what it looked like in the catalog and then what our existing home that's still there looks like. There are about 20 or so houses in here that we've identified, and there are probably more. They're everywhere. I've identified some in Berkeley, some in Royal Oak. Like I said, it's the danger of everywhere I drive. Yelling at my husband, slow down, stop. You have to go back, and we have to take a picture of this house, even when we're on vacation. I've also brought along all of the catalogs that I have. Most of them are reprints. You can still buy most of these most of them are through Dover, who reprints a bunch of things. I'm sorry, I walked away. And this one's just a facsimile of the 1921 Sears catalog, which even has blueprints in it. So there's some interesting things there. Feel free to look at any of those. And I brought a couple of copies. I only have a few leftover copies of our preservation newsletter that we published last fall. It has some resources for preservation. So if you know someone who's renovating a home and is looking for resources and help for keeping some of those nice old details, there are links to things that will help you through through the county and also through the State Preservation Office. And then one last thing, feel free to look at this, but it's very, very delicate. This is actually an original 1919 Aladdin Homes book with even has a few color fold-out plates in it. So you can get an idea of what their little catalog looked like if you sent your stamps away to get it. This might be what you got. So, and I'd like to, I'm sure I didn't cover everything. Studying Kit Homes is something you could do forever. So I don't know everything, and I'm sure I didn't cover everything. So if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can. Yeah.
Do you live in a kid house?
Do I? No, I live in a 1949 post-war, minimal traditional, boring little house. What's that?
We need a kid house.
It would be wonderful, but we like where we are too. So, yeah. Yes.
What is a four-square house?
Oh, a four-square is. Let's see. Do I know how to go back on this? You can't see it very well, but this house down here. They were typically a two-story house with a rather tall attic, usually a hip roof, and they were called a four-square because they tended to be 4 rooms on each floor. Sometimes there were only 3 rooms on the ground floor, but usually you would walk into either an entryway, you'd have a living room with a dining room behind that and a kitchen next to that, and then upstairs you'd usually have 3 bedrooms and a bath, and they're square, very blocky, square. Sometimes they call them Corn Belt farmhouses or Corn Belt cube. And yeah, they're very generic, they typically. Yes?
How many square feet would the original house have been?
The original Ladden house, I'm not exactly sure. I think it was probably around 500 square feet, 5 to 700 for a lot of the littler bungalows. They were quite small, but they did. Now I didn't bring pictures of some of the big ones, but if you look in the book with the red cover is Sears 1926 catalog. If you look in there, you'll see a home called the Magnolia, which looks like a southern plantation, with wing patios off the sides, and I think it's like a 2,700 square foot house. With some of them had 2 bathrooms. Some of them had wonderful features, like in the bathrooms they would even have an extra dental sink and a foot bath. Some of them had a sink in the closet. We can only assume it was for washing out your unmentionables, so you could hang them to dry. We don't know why. No one really knows. Some of them had fantastic features like that. Some of them had 2 rooms, and there was a wall bed to turn your living room into a sleeping area. That was all you had. So it was a huge array, everything from the very smallest, most modest home to a very elaborate home for a large family. Yes?
What would the range of cost be for a home?
It changed. It's hard to give a range because so many years went by, but if we're looking at like the 1920s, I think you could start with something for maybe $150 to $300 up to about $2,500 to $3,500. I think the most expensive one I saw was in the low 3,000s. The average homes typically seem to run between $1,200 and $1,700. So yeah, about a month's rent. Yes.
So a home included the wiring and electrical work?
I believe it did,
And if you,
but you know what?
if you had no experience, could you hook up to something? Or would you want your neighbor electrician to do that?
You would probably have someone do that for you, just like you may have someone lay your foundation. And actually, I'm not 100% sure if electrical was offered in all the homes, because I know in the beginning years it was not, because so many homes didn't have electricity, and a lot of these homes were being built. I know a lot of the houses built in Clawson, they didn't have electricity until the early 1920s. So these houses, obviously, there was no point in having it. So it may have been something you had to add yourself.
And the same with plumbing also.
Yeah, a lot of the houses had bathrooms. When you bought the house, you were getting, you could buy bathroom fixtures also. That was usually optional. So, and a lot of the homes you'll see, the earlier, smaller homes, there are no bathrooms. No, you'll have, it'll say 5-room house, and you look at it, there's no bathroom. So, yes.
Hearing impaired, and he couldn't hear the question that this lady asked, but yes, it did include the wiring. His father built
It did include the wiring. Okay, I wasn't 100% sure about that.
It included the plumbing too.
Okay. So, great to know. Isn't that cool? Yes.
Are they unique to the United
I know that they were sold, some were sold overseas. I haven't done any research to see if there are other companies in Europe or any place that actually had their own companies, but I have heard rumors of them being shipped other places, but can't confirm that. Yes?
Aladdin shipped a lot of kits to England to build a war manufacturing community, just prior to World War II.
That makes sense, because I know that they shipped some, there are some places in Virginia where they shipped
Yes,
basically whole communities
yes.
of homes for war, and also manufacturing companies often would order dozens and dozens of homes for their workers and create, basically little cities. Yeah.
Was there any part of the country where this was more popular?
I'm not really sure. It seems that because they ship them by railroad, you do seem to find, like, there's an area in Bay City that apparently has a lot of Aladdins because the company was located there. I'm not really sure about that. I haven't really looked into that.
But that makes sense for the.
Yeah, if they were, right. I know for Clawson, they had to come to the Royal Oak train station because we didn't have an actual train station in Clawson. We only had the interurban. So you'd have to go to Royal Oak to get your house and have somebody with a truck or a horse cart or something bring it to you. Yes?
So how big was this package when it arrived?
They had, I have,
FedEx was not around, the UPS was not around.
right. I've been told that they were between 10 and 30,000 individual pieces. But some of them, of course, would be really small. I'm really not sure how big of a package it would have been.
I'd like to have seen that coming off the train.
Yeah, that would be something. Yes.
His was shipped in a boxcar, and he had 1 week to get it from the railway station to where he built a home.
Oh, okay, so you'd unload it off of a boxcar. So I'm sure you'd have to make a few trips. Yes.
After you built the house, would you have to call a city wherever you live and say, I built this house?
I think it depended on where you were. One of the problems we've had with researching houses in Clawson is there really wasn't any building department. So there weren't any building permits. Nobody cared. So we have no records of when a lot of these homes were built because, nobody cared. It was your property, you put up a house. As long as you weren't in an area with any kind of restrictive covenant on the size and type of home, then you could pretty much do what you wanted. When we did have areas where there were restrictions on what you could build and how big it could be. And interestingly enough, one of those areas where they laid it out by street of how large a house could be is where we have the thickest concentration of kit homes. And I wonder if it was because you had to have you had to have a 2-story house if you built on this particular street. So the builder selling the land could offer you, well, I can build you this home. I can build you the Sears Puritan, which is one of the homes I showed. There are 3 or 4 of them on that street because you knew it would meet the criteria of what could be built in that neighborhood. And I just suspect, maybe that was why some of those homes were there. You knew you weren't going to have a problem. But in other parts of the city, it was kind of a free-for-all. And I imagine out in most of the townships, there wasn't anybody to care. Yes?
Are they still building these homes?
No, the last company that went out of business, Aladdin worked until 1980 or 81 when they went out of business. Sears went out of business about 1940, and Montgomery Ward's, I think, in the 30s.
I'm from Connecticut, and in Thomaston, Connecticut, there were almost all of these homes. And the last one I know of was built in the 50s. And I asked the girl who was having the house, her husband and his father were building it. I said, how big is the house? She said, big enough for 2. After they lived in it for a while, she wanted to have a family, and he said, there's no room in this house for babies. And there wasn't.
Wow. Yeah.
He did add on a little extension for the bathroom and a summer kitchen.
Yeah, and some of the smaller companies may have held on longer. I really don't know. The Depression took a lot out of them. Then there were other companies there was a company called Lustron that built the steel houses, which I didn't mention because I really haven't studied those. I've kind of studied everything through the 30s. They were steel panels that came, and you put those together. And there are still a few of those around, and I believe they went into the 50s as well. So the idea, like I said, and still some of the lumber yards that still offer little books where you can pick something out of there is kind of a child of this whole idea of avoiding an architect.
I've seen some of the steel arms in our.
Oh, do they have some of the lustrons there? I've never actually seen one.
If you ever see it, it's very distinctive.
Yeah, they're interesting. Yes?
Are the catalogs your private collection, or do they belong to
They,
Clausen Historical?
they belong to the Clausen Historical Museum.
And where is that?
That is on, we are on Fisher Court, which is just north of 14 Mile. If you know where the library is, we are, it's the first light north of 14 Mile on Livernois. We have our city hall on one side and our library on the other, and we actually share a parking lot with the library. We're a green and white house. We're open Wednesday and Sunday from 1 to 4, except for holidays, or close to holidays, and it's free. So if you ever want to come and visit us. Yeah, we have all of the books here. I've been adding to the collection since I've been there. So, other questions? Yes? Well, it didn't come with the home. Your foundation was your choice. So you would build either a foundation or a crawl space.
They didn't build basements then, like we have today?
Yeah, they did.
Or did they?
Yeah, but it didn't come with a house.
Oh, okay.
It was your choice to build that.
Gotcha.
So if you did, were there kit outhouses?
Kid outhouses. You know what? I think there actually were. I think I actually have seen one, but I'm not sure about that. But there were barns and garages, so you could buy all of those buildings also to go on.
There were standard works of progress and preservation plans.
Were there? Yeah, there wouldn't be. It wouldn't be too hard to build that. Yeah, whereas the home might be a little more detailed. Yeah, hopefully, yes. Maybe a window or two, yeah. Other questions? Okay. Well, feel free to come up and look at any of the materials that I have up here, and if you have any other individual questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. And, oh, I think you want to do your drawing? Okay, thank you.